All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're tackling a real head-scratcher, a mystery that's been around for decades. The Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah, this one's a classic.
Oh, it is. You've probably heard about the whole vanishing warship thing.
Oh yeah, the USS Eldridge supposedly disappearing into thin air.
Exactly, maybe even teleporting through time. Now we're going to go a little deeper than the usual rumors, though. We're diving into some first-hand accounts from people who claim they were actually there.
Wait, are we talking about eyewitness testimonies?
Not exactly. These are individuals who underwent hypnotic regression, claiming they can access past life memories of the experiment.
Past life memories, huh? So we're dealing with a whole other level of intrigue here.
We are. The question is, could there be any truth to these stories? Well, that's what we're here to figure out.
You know, what I find really interesting is the sheer number of these hypnotic regression accounts. It's not just one or two people claiming to remember these events. There's a whole bunch of them.
That's true. There are quite a few.
And even though their stories sometimes contradict each other, there are some striking similarities that pop up again and again.
Right, which just adds to the mystery, you know?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if there's a core truth buried under all these different versions.
Exactly. It's like trying to piece together a puzzle with some of the pieces missing.
A very strange puzzle indeed. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into all those details,
Yeah.
let's start with the basics. What were the supposed goals of this experiment?
Right. We've all heard about the whole invisibility to radar thing, right?
USS Eldridge supposedly disappearing from enemy screens. But do these regression accounts give us any more insight into what they were really trying to achieve?
Some of them do. And it goes way beyond just evading radar. For example, one source claims the goal was much bigger, to actually change the course of events.
Change the course of events. Okay, that's pretty ambitious.
It is, and it gets even wilder. Another individual describes a more scientific focus, like trying to figure out how to use Nikola Tesla's technologies to understand life processes on every level.
Wow, so we're talking about potentially altering history or unlocking the secrets of life itself.
That's what they seem to be suggesting.
Was this purely a military operation? Or was there something else going on, something maybe a little more, shall we say, metaphysical?
It's a question that's been bugging researchers for decades. And these hypnotic regression accounts, they just make it harder to figure out. Some of them back up that military objective, focused on wartime applications. But others, like the ones we just talked about, they hint at something deeper, something maybe beyond the reach of conventional science.
It's almost like they stumbled onto something they didn't fully understand. Okay, let's get down to brass tacks. Most folks associate the Philadelphia experiment with a specific date, October 28, 1943, at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. But I have a feeling things aren't going to be so clear-cut with these hypnotic regression accounts, right?
Yeah, you got that right. The timeline gets a little messy when you bring in these memories. That official date, October 28th. Well, one source remembers the experiment actually starting a day earlier, October 27th.
Interesting. So we already have conflicting timelines right off the bat.
We do. And get this, another source goes as far as to say that the date everyone knows, October 28th, that's intentional, like a cover-up,
Whoa, hold on a second. So they're claiming the official date is just a distraction meant to throw people off the scent.
That's what they seem to believe. And it's not just the date that gets muddled.
You're going to tell me the location is up for debate, too?
You bet. While most accounts mention the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, there are a few that throw some curveballs. One person remembers seeing barracks-like buildings nearby. Another describes a separate control center off-site.
Secret facilities hidden in plain sight.
Maybe. But the real kicker. One source claims that the actual teleportation event happened in space.
In space? Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, as in near-Earth space, they say.
So we're talking potential cover-ups, secret locations, and an event that might have happened beyond our planet.
It's enough to make you wonder, right? Was the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard just a front? A distraction from the real location and what they were really doing?
And if it happened in space, what kind of technology could even do that?
Exactly. Speaking of technology, let's dive into that a bit. The usual story points to Tesla coils, powerful electromagnetic fields, maybe even Einstein's unified field theory being involved.
It's a pretty wild mix of science and speculation, but we know these hypnotic regressions like to throw in their own twists.
Oh, they definitely do. Now, while you see Tesla coils and those powerful electromagnetic fields mentioned in a lot of accounts, some descriptions are a little, well, let's say unusual.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Sure. One person talks about this device that looked like a big green box that emitted this, like, lightning-like energy.
Hmm. Doesn't sound like any Tesla coil I've ever heard of.
It gets even more interesting. Another source describes seeing a wave-like energy beam, and the ship was moving so fast it became invisible to the naked eye.
Wait a minute, so they're saying the ship didn't actually disappear, it was just moving so fast we couldn't see it.
That's what they claim. And then there's another account that mentions the ship being coated in some special substance.
Like a cloaking device?
Well, maybe. They mention mercury being involved, possibly to enhance the ship's properties somehow.
This is getting more and more like something out of a science fiction movie.
It is, isn't it? But that's the thing that makes these accounts so captivating. Were these people just misinterpreting what they saw under hypnosis? Or did they actually witness some technology we can barely even imagine?
It's a tantalizing thought. All right, so we've got this advanced, possibly beyond our understanding technology, potentially being used for everything from winning a war to messing with the fabric of reality.
Sounds about right.
And now it's time to talk about the alleged masterminds, Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein.
Ah, yes, the big names. They definitely add to the intrigue, don't they?
They do. But like everything else in this story, the hypnotic regression accounts paint a bit of a confusing picture. What's the consensus on Tesla? Was he a willing participant in this whole thing, or was his work used without his knowledge or consent?
That's the thing. There's no easy answer, even within these accounts. Some people believe Tesla's inventions were absolutely key to the whole experiment.
Right,
But they also sense a reluctance from him, like maybe his work was used in ways he didn't intend or fully understand.
so he might have been a pawn in a bigger game.
Potentially. Now others feel a very strong connection between Tesla and the experiment.
So they think he was more involved than the official story suggests.
Exactly. It's all very murky. And then there's Einstein.
Was he the brains behind the operation, or was he just there to lend some credibility?
Once again, we have a split decision. Some believe Einstein's calculations were crucial.
Especially the ones tied to his unified field theory.
Right. But then you have others who think his involvement was more about appearances. You know, using his name to make the project look legitimate without revealing what they were truly up to.
So even the minds of those who claim to have been there are shrouded in secrecy. It's like the experiment itself wanted to remain hidden. But wait, there's one more fascinating detail. One source mentions a mysterious monk from the past. A monk. What on earth would a monk have to do with a top-secret military experiment in the 20th century?
That's one of the most baffling things to come out of these regressions. According to this one source, this monk, they say he possessed some kind of ancient knowledge about the technology used in the experiment.
Ancient knowledge. Okay, this is getting more and more intriguing by the minute.
It is, isn't it? And they claim this knowledge has been passed down through his students over generations.
So we're talking about a hidden lineage of knowledge, possibly going back centuries.
Potentially. It's a fascinating detail that adds another layer of mystery to this whole thing.
It certainly does. We're talking about a potential blend of ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science. Something straight out of, well, you know, a deep dive like this. But I think we need to take a break here and let all of this sink in for a moment. We've covered a lot of ground already, and I'm sure you've got all sorts of questions swirling around in your head right now.
Oh, I bet.
When we come back, we're going to delve into the alleged aftermath of the Philadelphia experiment. We'll hear about what supposedly happened to the sailors involved, and trust me, it's where things get truly unsettling, so stay with us.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Now get ready, because the accounts of what happened to those sailors involved in the Philadelphia experiment, well, they get pretty disturbing.
I have to admit, even I'm feeling a little uneasy.
It's understandable.
These accounts, while definitely fascinating, they can be pretty unsettling too. What kind of experiences are we talking about here? What did these individuals allegedly go through?
One thing that comes up a lot is this overwhelming sense of disorientation.
Yeah,
and confusion among the crew that, supposedly survived.
right.
Like one source describes this feeling of being detached from their own body.
Detached from their body.
Like they were, I don't know, trapped between dimensions or something.
Whoa, that's pretty intense.
It is. Another person remembers seeing other sailors acting really strangely.
Strangely how?
Like walking through walls or vanishing and reappearing randomly.
Vanishing and reappearing. That sounds more like a magic show than a science experiment.
Right. It's like the experiment messed with their perception of reality.
Like they were stuck in some kind of distorted world.
Exactly.
These accounts sound like something out of a sci-fi horror film.
They do, don't they? But remember, we're talking about the human mind here.
Right, which is incredibly complex and not always reliable.
Exactly. Could these just be, the effects of trauma? Or maybe the power of suggestion under hypnosis?
It's a good point. Trauma can definitely manifest in some pretty strange ways.
It can.
And, hypnotic regression, as helpful as it can be, it's not a perfect tool.
It has its limits.
It's possible these individuals, either consciously or not, are projecting their fears or anxieties onto their memories of the event.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. I mean, it was a pretty intense experience, to say the least.
No doubt. But some of these details, even if we factor in potential distortions, they're just so vivid and consistent across multiple accounts.
Like what?
Well, for example, one source talks about this really chilling phenomenon.
Yeah.
They describe sailors getting, stuck in the ship's structure.
Stuck?
Yeah, almost as if their molecular structure merged with the metal of the vessel.
Merged with the metal. That's pretty creepy.
It is. And it kind of echoes those stories we've heard about sailors being found embedded in the deck or bulkheads.
Oh, yeah. Like their bodies had literally fused with the ship.
Exactly.
It's a haunting image, isn't it? It really makes you question what's possible.
It does. And then there's this one account where a source describes encountering a being made of pure energy.
A being of pure energy.
Yeah, this radiant entity that seemed to come from the ship itself during the experiment.
During the experiment. Wow.
Yeah. And they felt this being was both benevolent and terrifying at the same time, like some force of nature.
Like it could create and destroy with equal ease.
Exactly.
That's a really intriguing detail. It kind of hints at the possibility that the Philadelphia experiment might have tapped into something beyond our physical reality,
Like some other dimension or realm.
Yeah, maybe populated by beings or energies we can't even comprehend.
It's a mind-blowing concept, and it's one that's been explored in so many myths and legends.
Right. This idea that there are forces at work in the universe that we only catch glimpses of every now and then.
It's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. But let's switch gears for a moment and talk about something else that's pretty disturbing in these accounts.
Yeah.
The alleged psychological manipulation.
Oh, right.
The control that the people running the experiment were supposedly using on the sailors.
That's a dark side to this whole thing.
It is. One source claims they witnessed sailors being subjected to, intense psychological
Conditioning.
Yeah, and even mind-altering drugs, all to make them more susceptible to the technology and to keep them quiet afterwards.
Wow. That's really unsettling to think they're treating these sailors like guinea pigs.
It's pretty messed up. If it's true, it raises some serious ethical questions about how far we're willing to go in the name of scientific progress.
It does. And remember, these accounts might just be the tip of the iceberg,
Meaning?
Meaning there could be a lot more people who were involved who were never able to talk about what happened to them.
Their stories lost to history.
Exactly.
It's a sobering thought. Okay, let's dive back into the more speculative aspects of the Philadelphia experiment.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
Well, one of the most persistent elements of the legend is the connection to time travel.
Ah, time travel. Now we're talking.
Right. And several sources describe experiencing these weird temporal anomalies during the experiment.
Like what?
Like feeling a distortion of time or even catching glimpses of other eras.
Glimpses of other eras. That's pretty wild.
It is. So is there any validity to these claims? Or are we firmly in the realm of science fiction here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is time travel even possible? And if it is, what would that mean for us? These hypnotic regression accounts, they definitely fuel the fire of speculation, even if they don't give us any concrete proof.
Right. For example, one source describes this moment of intense disorientation.
Disorientation.
Yeah, where they felt like they were existing in multiple time periods at once.
Whoa, that's trippy.
It is, like the experiment fractured the normal flow of time.
And created a jumble of past, present, and future.
Exactly.
That's a common theme in time travel stories.
It is.
This idea of messing with the order of time and experiencing all these different timelines colliding.
It's a mind-bending concept for sure.
It is. And even if we put aside the question of whether time travel is scientifically possible, just the idea itself brings up some heavy ethical and philosophical questions.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, what are the consequences of changing the past or the future? Who would even have the right to do something like that? And how could we prevent unintended consequences that could, ripple through time?
Those are questions that have inspired countless science fiction stories.
They have?
But the Philadelphia experiment, if we choose to believe these accounts, suggests that maybe those questions aren't just theoretical.
Right. It makes you confront the limits of what we know and imagine possibilities that are way outside our current scientific understanding.
It really does. Okay, let's venture into even more speculative territory for a moment.
Okay, I'm game. What are we diving into now?
Well, there's this alleged connection between the Philadelphia experiment and another infamous government program shrouded in mystery.
You're talking about the Montauk Project.
The one and only. What's the supposed link between these two projects? And do these hypnotic regressions shed any light on this connection? So the Montauk Project, right. It's supposed to have involved all sorts of crazy experiments like psychological warfare, time travel, even interdimensional travel, all happening at this secret underground facility in Montauk, Long Island.
Sounds like the plot of a blockbuster movie.
It does, doesn't it? And it's often seen as a continuation of the Philadelphia experiment, like taking the research even further.
Oh.
But the thing is, there's no hard evidence to connect them, for sure.
So we're talking about a potential network of secret projects, all pushing the boundaries of science and technology.
Yeah, all operating in the shadows, exploring things that most people can't even imagine.
Do any of the hypnotic regression accounts support this connection?
There's one where the source describes experiencing a shift in their consciousness during the Philadelphia experiment, like they were suddenly transported to a different place.
And this place, it was like the Montauk facility.
That's what they claim. They also say they saw people being subjected to all sorts of mind-bending experiments.
Experiments designed to mess with their perceptions of time and space.
Exactly. Now, this is just one account, so it's hard to say how much weight to give it, but it does fit with the whole narrative of the Montauk Project being a continuation of the Philadelphia experiment.
Right, like they took what they learned from one project and applied it to the next.
Precisely. It's a pretty fascinating, if speculative, connection. It suggests that we might be dealing with not just one isolated incident, but a whole series of interconnected projects.
All pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, and maybe venturing into some pretty dangerous territory.
That's right. It makes you wonder, what were they really hoping to achieve with all of this? Was it just pure scientific curiosity? Or was there something more sinister going on?
Like a desire for power, control, maybe even the ability to manipulate reality itself.
It's a question that's hard to answer. And then there's the biggest question of all.
Oh, you mean the potential involvement of extraterrestrial beings?
Bingo. Some sources claim that the technology used in the Philadelphia experiment, and maybe even the Montauk Project, wasn't entirely human.
Like they got help from aliens.
That's what they're suggesting, either in the form of knowledge or maybe even direct assistance.
Okay, now we're really going down the rabbit hole here.
We are, aren't we? But
Yeah.
That's part of what makes the Philadelphia experiment so intriguing. It forces us to consider possibilities that are way outside our normal understanding.
So what do these hypnotic regression accounts tell us about this alien involvement? Are we talking full-blown close encounters or something a little more subtle?
Well, one source says they saw a craft of unknown origin hovering near the USS Eldridge during the experiment.
Like a UFO?
It sounds like it. And they felt like it was observing or maybe even influencing what was happening. Another source claims to have communicated telepathically with a being who said they were extraterrestrial.
Telepathically, that's pretty far out there.
It is. And this being, they supposedly expressed both curiosity and concern about the humans trying to mess with time and space.
Like they were worried we were going to screw things up.
Maybe. But remember, these are all just accounts from people who went through a very intense and potentially traumatic experience. It's hard to know for sure what really happened.
It is. We have to take these accounts with a grain of salt, right?
Absolutely. But even if we dismiss the most outlandish claims, the fact that these themes keep popping up and the intensity with which people describe these experiences, it makes you wonder if there's something more to this story than we know.
It definitely makes you think. So we've explored the potential aftermath of the Philadelphia experiment.
We have.
From those disturbing accounts of physical and psychological trauma to the mind-blowing possibilities of time travel and encounters with beings from other dimensions.
It's been a wild ride so far.
It has. But where do we go from here? How do we make sense of all this speculation, hearsay, and subjective experiences?
That's the challenge, isn't it? When we come back, we'll try to untangle some of these threads and explore some alternative explanations for the Philadelphia experiment. We'll also talk about its lasting impact on our culture. So stick around, there's more to come.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. I don't know about you, but after all those mind-bending accounts of the Philadelphia experiment's aftermath,
Yeah.
I'm ready for a little dose of reality.
I hear you. It's easy to get lost in all the speculation, especially with a mystery like this.
It is.
So let's take a step back from the more out there claims and look at some other explanations for the Philadelphia experiment. One theory that gets thrown around a lot is that the experiment wasn't about teleportation or invisibility at all,
Okay.
but something called degaussing.
Degaussing.
Yeah.
That definitely sounds a lot less sci-fi than what we've been talking about.
It does, doesn't it?
Remind me, what exactly is degaussing?
Basically, it's reducing or eliminating a ship's magnetic field.
Okay.
And during World War II, this was a big deal
Why?
because of magnetic mines.
Ah, right. Those were triggered by a ship's magnetic signature.
Exactly. They were a real threat to naval vessels. So if you could degauss a ship, you could theoretically make it harder for those mines to detect it.
That makes sense, especially in a wartime setting.
Uh-huh.
But how does degaussing, which sounds relatively straightforward,
Yeah.
connect to all these wild stories about invisibility and teleportation?
I know, it's a pretty big leap.
It is.
But think about it. Back then, a lot of people probably didn't even know what degaussing was.
True.
So imagine seeing a warship covered in all these electrical cables, powerful generators humming, compasses and other equipment going haywire because of the magnetic fields.
Yeah.
It's not hard to see how someone, especially with all the wartime secrecy and tension,
Right.
might misinterpret what they were seeing.
And jump to conclusions about invisibility or teleportation.
Exactly.
So are we saying that the Philadelphia experiment was just a case of mistaken identity? Like a normal scientific experiment that got blown way out of proportion?
That's one possibility. But there is another theory that suggests the Philadelphia experiment was actually intentional disinformation.
Intentional?
Yeah, like a deliberate attempt by the Navy to mislead the enemy about what their technology could really do.
Ah, so they were spreading rumors of teleportation and invisibility to scare their opponents.
Exactly. It could have been a way to create confusion and fear, maybe even deter attacks or make them waste resources.
Classic psychological warfare.
Yep. And remember, this was a time when secrecy and deception were crucial.
For sure.
Just planting a little seed of doubt, making the enemy question what the U.S. was capable of.
It could have been a really effective strategy.
It could have. But why choose such a crazy story? Wouldn't something a little more believable have been better for spreading disinformation?
That's a good question.
Well, think about the psychological impact of a story like the Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre, so outside the realm of normal experience, that it practically defies rational explanation.
Right.
The point might not have been to convince anyone that it was true.
But to just create chaos.
Exactly. To make the enemy think, if they can teleport warships, what else can they do?
That's a pretty chilling thought. So we've got degaussing, disinformation, and a healthy dose of psychological warfare. Are there any other explanations for the Philadelphia experiment we should consider?
Well, we can't forget the simplest explanation of all.
Which is?
That the whole thing was a hoax.
A hoax.
Yeah, made up by someone looking for fame or money.
You're saying the Philadelphia experiment never happened at all?
It's possible. Think about it. The first detailed account didn't come out until the 1950s, years after the supposed event.
And it came from a guy who claimed to be talking to aliens.
Right, that's right, Carlos Allende. And his credibility, well, let's just say it's been questioned a lot.
To put it mildly, it's not hard to see how a story as wild as the Philadelphia experiment would attract attention seekers.
It would.
People looking to make a quick buck or become famous.
Exactly. And once the story got out there, it's easy to see how others might have added their own details, embellished it, and created the snowball effect of misinformation and speculation.
So we're basically left with a puzzle with a bunch of different potential solutions.
We are.
Each with its own pros and cons. Do we just pick the explanation that fits our own beliefs? Or is there a way to cut through all the noise and find the real truth about the Philadelphia experiment?
That's the thing about historical mysteries.
Yeah.
We often end up with more questions than answers.
It's true.
The Philadelphia experiment, like a lot of events shrouded in secrecy and speculation, will probably remain a topic of debate for years to come.
Probably true.
There's just not enough evidence and too many conflicting stories to say for sure what really happened.
It can be frustrating, but I think that's part of what makes these deep dives so interesting.
I agree. Sometimes it's not about finding the definitive answer.
Right.
It's about the journey of exploring the unknown, grappling with the mystery.
I like that. So even if we never know for sure what happened during the Philadelphia experiment,
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that it's a story that makes us think, that challenges our assumptions about what's possible.
Absolutely. And it reminds us to be critical thinkers,
Yeah.
to question what we hear, and to be open to different perspectives.
Well said. Speaking of perspectives, let's talk about the cultural impact of the Philadelphia experiment for a moment.
Okay.
This story has become like a cornerstone of conspiracy theories.
Oh, it has.
It's inspired so many books, movies, TV shows, even video games.
It's true. It's everywhere.
It seems like everyone, from science fiction writers to paranormal investigators, has their own take on it.
It's become a symbol of government secrecy, the dangers of science going too far, and the possibility that there's more to reality than we know.
Right.
It's a story that taps into our deepest fears and our wildest dreams.
And just keeps evolving.
It does.
With every retelling, there's another layer of complexity, another thread added to the web of speculation.
It's almost like the Philadelphia experiment has become a living thing, you know?
What do you mean?
Like it's being shaped by our collective imagination and anxieties.
That's a pretty interesting way to look at it. So what can we take away from all of this? I think, whether it really happened or not, the Philadelphia experiment reminds us that there are still mysteries out there that we can't easily explain.
Definitely. It shows us the limits of what we know and how much we're drawn to the unknown.
It does. This has been a pretty wild deep dive,
It has.
full of twists and turns and what-ifs.
We've explored the history, the first-hand accounts, the alternative explanations, and even how the Philadelphia experiment has affected our culture.
And even though we might not have any definitive answers, I think we've all learned a lot about this enduring legend and its power over our imaginations.
I think so too. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging, to explore the sources, look at the evidence, and come to your own conclusions about what might have happened during the Philadelphia experiment.
Exactly. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the mysteries that are all around us. Until next time, stay curious.